From the Vault is sponsored by Vita Coffee and Wine Bar in downtown Sandusky, where the elite meet to eat. Visit us in person or on the web at vitasandusky.com.
Welcome to another edition of From the Vault, leadership lessons you can bank on. I'm Paul Ward. Today I'm with Coach Travis Crabtree. Coach, good to see you. Welcome to From the Vault, leadership lessons you can bank on.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. This is going to be an exciting one. Travis is a wrestling coach, head wrestling coach in his 26th year at Perkins High School here in Northern Ohio. But before we get to Travis, let me acknowledge my good friend Tom Siegel, owner of Vita, where the elite meet to eat, Columbus Avenue in beautiful Sandusky, Ohio, the roller coaster capital of the world. From the Vault, leadership lessons you can bank on is also sponsored by LuckyStonePromotions.com, LuckyStonePromotions.com, and produced by Lake Erie TV. Coach Crabtree is among the winningest head wrestling coaches in Ohio history. And Ohio is definitely a wrestling state. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We take our kids to some national tournaments and wrestle state champs from other states and beat them. And, it's a privilege to coach in the great state of Ohio.
What are other wrestling states? Let's examine that a second. Ohio is among them. What other states do you think of when I say a good wrestling state?
It comes to my mind is Pennsylvania, bordering state. They're always tough in high school or nationally in the collegiate level. New York is tough. Illinois is tough. California is a tough wrestling state. And some of those states only have one division. So to be a state champion, some of them states is, phenomenal. And in the state of Ohio, we have 3 divisions. But we got a lot of tough kids, and we compete on a national level. It's great.
I believe wrestling is a sport unlike any other. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
There are so many things that make wrestling different. A couple that come to my mind, not just the intensity. Other sports are intense. Wrestling is, I think, has a heightened intensity level. If you ever see parents at a wrestling dual meet or tournament, they don't act that way at a football or basketball game. Parents are really freaking out at wrestling matches when they see their kid out on the mat. So the intensity is there, but also things like hygiene. Things like weight control. Talk a little bit about how, as your 26th year, 17th on the all-time list now, you just moved up from 18th with 332 dual meet wins, how you manage that intensity, the hygiene, the weight control, all the things that make wrestling a sport unlike any other.
Well, it's a team effort, and not only within our program, we also have to reach out to other people who are very knowledgeable and professional about it. You're talking about your host, Tommy Siegel. His daughter is a well-known nutritionist and works at the Ohio State University with their wrestling team. So there's a resource that we can use when we need it. We have family members who are nurses and, doctors that we're able to make phone calls about. Hygiene is a big thing about kids cleaning their lockers, taking their stuff home, make sure they're showering, using the correct stuff when they do shower. Sometimes you have an outbreak of, you talk about wrestling, some parents cringe, because the first thing you think about is impetigo or ringworm. And if you have an outbreak at that can shut your program down. So as a coach, you have to be able to manage that. And there's been times in my career when we've had to shut our program down for 3, 4, 5 days just to clear some things up, with skin issues. COVID, when COVID hit, the whole world had to change and sports changed. And we never had things like even this, a podcast, or watch and pay for sports or different things where you can watch your kid online from your telephone. If I'd have told you that 30 years ago, or you would have said no way. And so now we have those type of technologies, And, but wrestling, you talk about parents, wrestling is one of the few sports where they actually let parents like get right up 2 inches from the mat. Mm-hmm. And it seems like moms are a little more, into it than some of the dads. And, and it's, they're right there and they see their kid's arm gets put over their head or behind their back and they start, getting a little crazy, which we all can, a little intense. But it has a lot of things involved with it, weight cutting, plus keeping their grades up academically in school. So there's a lot of things that goes into wrestling that other sports don't have. I mean, all these sports have team meals. We're going to have our first team meal in 5 years, and I think I've only done 2 of them, in 32 years of total coaching with wrestling, because we're going to weigh in next Saturday at the regional duels, and we don't wrestle till about 12:30. So I got the parents putting on a breakfast. So that's going to be our second team meal in, my coaching career for wrestlers.
Well, I've had occasion to see you in action I visited your practice room. I coached against you. So I think I'm responsible for 2 or 3 of those 332 wins, actually, and having you whip me.
And I'd like to thank you for that.
Yeah. But I like what you're saying about networking and using other resources to give you advice. And I have to say, there's only one other coach, and I'm sure there are many others, that I saw be able to leverage talent, leverage knowledge from others like that. And it's my friend Tony Legando from Huron in the football program, having a kind of, I say Memphis Mafia, that's my term. But I ran into you at a wrestling camp at Michigan State, and your Memphis Mafia shows up in Lansing, Michigan. Tell me about that group and tell me about how that has helped you as a coach, having support, having people around you, getting things done, maybe financing things.
You're only good as a coach as the people you surround yourself with. And as a coach, you got to be able to, the number one thing I talk to my coaches about, or parents or students, is loyalty. And if you have loyal people around you, they're always going to be loyal. To this day, I still have kids who walk into our room, well, now they're young adults, young men with families, walk into our room to watch practice, or they just show up a meet and they, just want to talk. And it's great to see these young men advance onto their lives. And you got to, and they're always going to be there. And I've had a coach with me, James Snyder's been with me for 25 years. I've been at Perkins, and it's just loyalty. And if you treat people well, they're going to treat you well, and they're going to stay with you. And in high school sports, you need a good network of people around you, because you're going to have kids who might not be able to afford just a simple thing as a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, and you have to be able to reach out to somebody and say, hey, can you sponsor these kids? Can you help out? We just started a girls wrestling program, and I reached out to one of our loyal people and said, hey, can you get these girls, we want to make it special, can you get them singlets with their names on it, sweatshirt and a t-shirt? How much do you need? I gave them a number. They sent the money right to the Vantage Wrestling. And within 3 weeks, the girls were separated from the guys with Perkins Women's Wrestling. And it just comes down to loyalty and honesty.
One of the things that I've watched you do also is nurture leadership. Coaches from your staff that have gone on to become head coaches. I like the story of your impending retirement. You're about to retire, right? And you've got someone poised and ready to become head coach. So you have done that for Perkins Schools. You've got the next, they don't have to go out and find someone, is that right?
That's correct. We got a whole staff. My son, Drew, he's 27. He's in his 3rd year teaching at Erie Elementary in the special education department. And he's been coaching with me. He coached or he wrestled 1 year collegiately. He's a state placer, and he, he's ready to be a head coach. And I've been doing it for 32 years altogether. 26 years at Perkins, 25 as a head coach. I was going to do it last year, but people like good friends like you are going to say, "Why didn't you do it 25 years?" And I thought to myself, 25 sounds better than 24. So I decided, to coach 1 more year. And I've had a couple of kids say, "Hey, why don't you, we want you to finish with us." But if you listen to that every year, you would never, step down. But I wouldn't call it retirement. I'm just going to call it trade places, because now I get to tell him, "Hey, Drew, you're getting soft. Hey, Drew, that practice wasn't hard enough." Or, "Hey, Drew, the bus is leaving at 6, tournament starts at 10, I'll see you at 9:30. But, he's ready to go. And there's been times the past couple of years where I've let him take leadership charge of the team. Like this weekend, we had 5 duels. And I said, "Okay, Drew, we met Friday night. These are the teams we're wrestling. What should our lineup be? How are you going to handle this situation? Okay, you're in charge. I'm going to be there. If there's a problem, I'll step in, I'll solve it. But you're in charge of the tournament. You're in charge of who's going to wrestle, who's not. So show me you're ready to be a head coach."
What a great internship he's having. So are you going to be his assistant?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
He's not going to tell me what to do. But yeah, I have no problem being assistant coach. I've been head coach, I've been assistant. I think I'm a pretty good assistant coach because I have that experience when we have younger coaches and they're able to come ask. I've coached varsity football for the past 5 years with Coach Santoro. We brought him on when he was 26 or 27 years old from Bellevue to be our head football coach. And I was able to help, direct him into some situations, especially behind the scenes stuff. Coaching's easy. It's handling things behind the scenes that people don't see. But the paperwork, dealing with parents, dealing with boosters, dealing with fundraising and things like that. So, I'm going to be there for Drew, just like running a youth wrestling tournament with 400 people there. Like you said, you got parents right on the mat, and they're different. Have 400 different people in the gym. You got to be able to handle 100 different situations within an hour. So it's good to have, veteran people there to help on your staff.
Well, you talk about different sports, and now I want to flip the coin, and instead of emphasizing what's different about wrestling, what's the same? I mean, you've coached. I got to believe that some of your coaching philosophies are applicable no matter what you're doing. So I was going to try to memorize this, but you have coached baseball at different levels, track at the middle school level, and softball. What am I missing? Of course, wrestling, American Legion baseball, so that's a high school level. And you've served as assistant athletic director as an interim. What philosophies, leadership philosophies, coaching philosophies, education philosophies that apply to all those scenarios?
Well, the number one thing we already touched on is loyalty. You need loyal people. You need loyal athletes. I think you got to make it fun. As an educator, you got to be able to teach, but the kids got to feel comfortable coming into your classroom to learn. And part of that is discipline, and you got to be able to have fun. You got to know where the line is. Responsibility. Wrestling as a sport is the winter sports are the worst thing to coach because you have winter to start with, as the weather we've had. School's canceled. You got to wait till noon to see if you can have practice because of safety. 2, kids they're out of their time management program of going to school and then going to practice. Now they're at home and they have to get to practice while mom and dad is working, so they have to figure out a way how to get there. So you got to teach them accountability. You got to teach them respect. You got kindness. I was on a recruiting visit with my son at Muskingum University, and the baseball coaches were like, we have an open door policy. And I'm thinking, I asked him, I said, well, what does that mean? Every coach should have an open door policy. And he says, no, everybody thinks that, but all of our baseball players, when they get to the door, they have to open it and hold it until the last person walks through. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. And they're like, that's why we're the most respected program at our university, because just of that one act of kindness that we do every day, it makes us, look good as a program, but it's teaching these young men how to be real men. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was, I try to have implemented that this past year with our kids. I try to talk about that in my classroom, about just doing one random act of kindness, and be consistent at it. So those are some things that you have to do. And, another thing I believe in, a guy taught me this a long time ago by the name of Larry Shank from Heidelberg University, is if you kick them in the butt, by the time they leave, you got to pat them on the back. And that's the number one rule that I try to follow when, as I call it, coaching loudly if it's whatever sport it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You must have a lot of support from home. All that coaching on top of your role as a professional educator at Perkins High School. How do you manage work, personal life, and talk a little bit about that?
I have a great wife, number one. She was in the sports. Her siblings were in the sports. Her dad's a big sports guy, so she's always supported me. I've never used that excuse that, I think it's time for me to step down to be with my kids, because I coach my kids. I coach my kids in the summer. I have a great relationship with them. I think that, by coaching them and being a leader, I get to teach them more leadership skills by being with them and trying to teach them the right way. And if I have my kid with me and I'm coaching, usually I have 3 or 4 kids in the back seat. So now I get to, be a leader to 3 or 4 other kids. And, I was the first person from my family to graduate a college. And since then, we've had others follow. But my kids always support me. They're always with me. I got pictures of my sons, my daughter. The only person I really never got to coach was my daughter. But when I was the head softball coach, she was a senior and said, I'm coming out for softball. I said, no, you're not, because I want to cut you because you never played. So she went and high jumped, which she never done before either. But I got a great family. My son is coaching with me, which is fantastic. And there's a lot of times we're in a chair together and people say, do you guys are saying the same thing at the same time in the same words? And I'm like, yeah, I've noticed that, but I love it.
Yeah, of course.
So we have a great relationship, and he's going to get to be his own coach. He doesn't have to be like Dad. He's got his own philosophy, and sometimes he steps on my toes a little bit, trying to tell the team what to wear and what to do, and I have already told him another thing, and they kind of just like look at both of us, and mm-hmm. I just kind of give in and say whatever he said. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that. And I knew that you can't coach that long without support from home, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to share a little about that.
There is one time, I will share this. There was one time when Dylan was in 4th grade and we were doing flag football, and my wife said, you're not going to coach, you're going to watch. And I said, I'll try, but you're coming with me to watch the coach. So we sat there the first practice, and she's like, that wasn't too bad. And I bit my tongue. Second practice, she says, okay, you made your point, get out there. Because there was a guy named Larry Shank who told me once, when I left Heidelberg, he said, you're going to a high school, you're a coach, you're going to have kids, they're going to be athletes, they're going to ask you to coach everything, youth to varsity. So you got to ask yourself 2 questions. I got to rephrase this because I can't say it exactly how I said it. But
you can speak freely.
You either got to be the asshole or put up with the asshole. So I choose to be that guy.
Very good. Well done. That should be on a wall somewhere.
It's a true statement. I tell young coaches and young dads that too, mm-hmm. because you got to do one or the other. And, but if you're a coach then you should be able to help others also.
Well, I like your use of the technical term asshole, and I'd like to explore that a little bit. From the Vault Leadership Lessons You Can Bank On likes to explore bad leadership. One of the reasons we like to do that is that I think contrast is a good illustrator. Here's what good leadership looks like. Here's what bad leadership looks like. You can't be a head coach for 26 years and not have witnessed, I'm talking about other coaches that you're competing against. I'm talking about all variety of leaders, professional educators, education administrators. We don't call people out. We're not going to identify an organization or an individual, but we are going to explore some of the elements of bad leadership. Talk about that a little bit. What have you run into that you identified as, that's not right, that's bad leadership, that's taking us down the wrong road?
I don't know if we have enough time for that, but some of the things I see, like not holding kids accountable from the beginning. Because if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. So if they miss one practice and they're not punished, or if they're in one detention and they show up 20 minutes late and there's no discipline to that, then what's the point of having accountability? And I've seen that a lot. We've had kids, athletes come from other program in other parts of the state, and they think Christmas break is a vacation. Well, I counted. We had 14 practices and 2 tournaments over Christmas break. If you missed that, that's almost that's a third of the season. So you have to have accountability, and I've seen that. Just again, seen not coaches, but also teachers or just people in the community, how they speak to other people and yell at them and just, criticize them, but then there's no love afterwards. Just a high five, a fist bump, a hug, hey, that's a teachable moment. And, I look at it, I take notes sometimes and I tell young coaches, and I talk about this in my officiating class that I do in school, is sometimes there's things you learn from adults, coaches, leaders, what you should do, and then there's things you learn what you don't do. And you get to pick and choose which one of those you want. Either like the way that he coaches and how he disciplines, or you don't. And, I look at it as teachable moments and, trying to mentor some young coaches. It's, that's an important thing. We coach loudly, Perkins. We coach loudly, and I don't care if the gym is quiet or if you're in a gym or on a field. You may hear me down the block. That doesn't matter to me but I will pat you on the back before you leave. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. But, there's I've seen a lot of things over the years. And, I look at it as a teachable moment for your team or kids or, young coaches. You just teach them, hey, that's either right or wrong. And if you're going to be a coach, you got to have your own philosophy. And every coach has their different approach. Let's Gary Quizno, for example. We've coached against him, and Gary's not a loud person, but he's one of the most winningest coaches in Ohio history and in the Hall of Fame. And I've coached with him, and I've coached against him, and I don't think I've heard him raise his voice maybe less than 5 times. And somebody like me, I raise my voice, and sometimes I wish I could be more like him. Sometimes I tell myself that. So there's a lot of, I don't like to say, like use it in your terms as bad, but they're more teachable moments. Mm-hmm. Kid throws his headgear. I've seen coaches yell at him, but then I've seen coaches do nothing. So which one's good, saying nothing or raising your voice?
Yeah.
It's got to be a teachable moment at that time, and you make a mental note of that. I'm not going to act that way. Or if I am acting that way, we have a thing on our staff as if you see us acting out of character because we're coaching with our heart, because maybe it's our kid or a athlete we're really attached to, our philosophy is if you see us acting out of character, you pull us aside and you tell us so we can correct it. Because we don't want to mislead or show bad leadership. So we police ourselves. And I always designate a few parents in the stands that are loyal and have been loyal to me over the years to say, hey, if you see us acting out of character because you have a different set of eyes, you let me know and we'll correct it. Because we don't want to come off that way and we don't want our team to think that is correct.
We had Colonel Joel Hagee on a previous podcast, and he talked a lot about different elements, different immutable truths for leadership. But I think there are also, leadership styles that ebb and flow from one leader to another, and that's some of what you're talking about. You've got to be you. You can't be the quiet coach. I've seen you. That's not you. If you tried to suppress that, people would think you got sick. So what did William Shakespeare teach us? To thine own self be true. And I think if you are not, people see through that. Now you're acting. Now you're trying to be something for some reason. I'm not saying we can't evolve over time. We can't become, okay, I think I'm a little more boisterous. I want to hone that a little bit, or I want to sharpen that a little bit, if that's true, if it's not true. But I say you don't change, man. You have accomplished great things. And a question I want to ask you about this great success that Perkins Wrestling has had over the years, one of the things that you don't seem to ever have is a problem with numbers. It's a competitive environment. And that's something that transcends education and athletics. What do corporations want? When there's a job opening, they want 200 applicants, not 2. You want to create a program that's attractive to others. You have done that. You have maintained that. What's the secret?
It's a good question. I don't know if there is a secret. I've learned over the past probably 10 years, and I wish I'd have known this, 20 years ago, is the more honest you are with your athletes or just people in general, they respect you a lot more. Just being honest, and you get more out of them. I've got more out of my athletes the past 5 or 6 years just being honest with them. And sometimes honesty is not a good thing to hear, especially if somebody is not doing something correctly. But if they want to change, you can't just keep letting them do the wrong thing. And as an educator, I try to be honest in my classroom. Some parents don't like to talk to me because they don't want they know they're going to get the truth. I'm going to be honest with them, good or bad. I'm going to be honest with them. And I've had parents come up to me and be like, why isn't my son playing? I'm like, you really don't want me to answer that? Yes, I do. And I tell them, then they don't like me. But I tried to warn them. But, I believe in honesty. I believe, in loyalty. We treat our kids well. If, like I touched on earlier, if a kid can't afford something, we make sure they have it. And they respect that. It's just knowing kids, and we try to get the best athletes we can get out for wrestlers. Starts our youth program. With the numbers, you got to have the right people down there coaching. You touched on my son when he came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to be the head coach when you're done." I said, "Well, you have to coach the youth program first. I'm not stepping down to you coach and take over our youth program, because those are your future wrestlers, and you have to earn their respect and before you can be a head coach, because you have to funnel kids up through." That's why we coach junior high football, because if you coach junior high football, you can get some of those kids who aren't playing basketball, or they only keep 12 kids on a basketball team. We have 14 wrestlers, all different weights. And we try to explain to kids, size, weight, it's competitive. It teaches you more about life than, other sports like you were talking about. But, I think this year we got like 12 junior high football players to wrestle who've never wrestled before, just because I have 4 wrestling coaches coaching junior high football with me.
I do think it's a fallacy that if you don't start wrestling in second grade, you can't pick it up in seventh or ninth. I've seen young wrestlers get competitive quickly. Have you seen that too?
Back in 2008, I had a young man. His name was Jeremiah Fennell. He was a heavyweight for me. And he played junior high football for me. And he was always late because his dad would bring him to practice late. God bless his soul. He would bring him late. And I'd make him run every time he was late. And he'd be like, "Coach, you trying to kill me?" Like, "No, you're just late. Don't be late." Well, your dad's not coming to run. You're running. Maybe he's doing it on purpose because you're not doing your chores. I don't know. But you're running. He's not. And he came out, he told me as a freshman, he's 6'4", 285 pounds. "I'm going to wrestle, Coach." I'm like, "You're lazy." "No, you're not. I don't want to deal with you." "Coach, I need it." He was our starting heavyweight, was 0-36 as a freshman. I'm like, okay. Sophomore year, he was like 5-30. Junior year, he got beat in a wrestle off, had to wrestle JV. His senior year, he placed 7th in the state, took him to the national tournament, which was in Cleveland. He drew the number 1 kid first round, which we had, because back then you didn't have your phone and you had to call somebody to dial up internet to say, "Hey, who is this kid?" And they would tell you, you know. And so this kid was number 1. We were beating him like 8-0. And we ended up losing like 15-14. Kid came all the way back and lost in the blood round to a kid who was a All-American at Rutgers, ended up being All-American at Rutgers. And he got a full ride scholarship to wrestle at Campbellsville University and ended up graduating. And I mean, economically, the kid, I had to get him sponsors or get him stuff myself. Mm-hmm. And when he graduated, he came and knocked on my door and said, "Coach, I just got in town. Here's my diploma. Thank you."
Oh, that's a wonderful story.
You know, and that's just from a kid who just thought I was trying to kill him from running him to being 0-36 to placing the state tournament and doing well at the nationals and didn't pay a penny for his education.
Very gratifying for you. It had to be very gratifying for you.
I mean, it's awesome. I mean, we all have stories of kids, you know, doing different things, but, you know, that's when I tell a lot to kids.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I look for in high quality leadership is to start something, you know, create something, leave a legacy that is, you know, forever. You started, tell me about the Sandusky Bay Scrappers.
That's a local baseball organization based out of here in Sandusky. When Dylan, we played at the old VFW when they had baseball fields there before Thor Sports bought it behind the VFW. And Teddy Sturzinger and Teddy's an educator, principal at Vanguard now. His son Weston, who plays football at Youngstown State, we coached together and taught together, and we're like, "Hey, let's start a travel team." So Teddy is like, "Hey, we're gonna call it the Sandusky Bay Scrappers." So we started looking for kids, and after a few years, we started doing pretty well, and we won a couple state championships and won a few national tournaments and did really well. And then there's, you know, in your town, you have a lot of local travel teams and everybody's called something different. So we had a couple coaches reach out and say, "Hey, we're trying to get in these tournaments, but we can't. Can we be called the Sandusky Bay Scrappers? Because you guys have set such a high precedent in your leadership and your teams being respectful, winning these tournaments, you know, that will help us get into these tournaments." So we led a couple teams, and, you know, one of the teams were some other teachers who I coach with, and they became the Scrappers, and then they started winning. And so then it just kind of trickled down. Now there's like 13 teams in this area called the Sandusky Bay Scrappers. And it just started, you know, when Dylan, my youngest son, and Weston Surginger were, 6 years old, and Teddy started it, and I jumped on board with him. And Dylan was the only kid who went from 6 to 18 years old and did the whole circuit all the way through, which is I coached a lot of travel baseball.
Yeah. But you started a league, and I think
helped start it with Teddy and an organization, and it's pretty statewide known as a competitive local program, and we're not charging like some of these teams are. We don't charge $4,000 or $5,000 and pay the coaches. All the coaches are voluntary, and they do it because they want their kids to have great success.
Well, I love that story, and as I said, I think it's a mark of an exceptional leader is to leave some legacy, leave a program, start something. One of the things I want to conclude with is back to your success as a wrestling coach at Perkins High School here in Northern Ohio. You have had, I've got some notes here, 60 state qualifiers, 60, and 30 state placers. That's incredible. And you were third in the state last year. Is that right, as a team?
Last year was an extraordinary year at Perkins and for me as a coach. And I really didn't notice it until my son Drew said, "Hey, Dad, has anybody ever coached in 3 state championships in the same season?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, you helped coach the varsity football team to the state championship, which we lost by 1 point. Then in wrestling, our heavyweight Eli Sanchez took second. So I coached in the state championship, and we were in the team race, and we finished third by half a point. Then in baseball, assistant varsity baseball coach, we finished second in the state to Mentor Lake Catholic, 3-2. So we lost. I was on the coaching staff, and we lost by 1 point in state championship in football and baseball. And in baseball, it came down to my son's last at bat, and he had a chance, to win the game. But it's baseball. We teach him, you get up there, you put the ball in play, and whatever happens. And as any good dad would say, don't strike out. So he put a ball in play, they caught it, we lose 3-2. But, you try to, you see all these athletes crying, and, you try to console them. And it was it was an awesome year to be a coach on those staffs. And I got to experience all 3 of them, but we lost.
Right.
We took second, Eli took second, we finished third, and then we lost.
Yeah, second in the state is great.
Well, that's
but to go through 3 championship losses, I only have one question. When the 1st of June came around, or whenever after the baseball state championship, middle of June, I imagine, when that comes around, did you seek counseling?
Yeah, I was back on the baseball field coaching the Scrappers.
So that was your therapy.
Yeah, umpiring.
Get back after it.
Get back after it. People ask me, you're old school. They don't make them like you coaching. Basically, I coach 365 days a year. And I'm like, well, you know what? I can sleep when I die because I love doing what I'm doing. And I love seeing kids succeed and do great things. I have athletes from our school who come talk to me. Mental health is a big thing. And, these kids and negative thoughts, going through their heads. And it's, you're always talking to different athletes about, that. And I talk about this in class, and it's about that little voice in your head. It can go one way or the other. And if you, and I would tell them, to make this short, I would tell them, if you listen to that little voice and you're saying, the studies show the next word is can't. I can't. So I've tried to get my son's class to talk in third person to themselves, because when they say their name, they're not going to say nothing negative after it. So when they're competing, I try to get, like Braylon Collier, who's playing wide receiver for Michigan State right now, played for some of the Scrappers and played Perkins baseball. Instead of saying, calling for the fly ball, ball, mine, he would say, Bray's ball, nice catch, Bray, and that's how we try. But he talks out loud. That's why he's at Michigan State. He's at another level.
Yeah.
But, even for ourselves, you try to tell yourself, Travis, you can do this podcast. You're going to be positive, watch your mouth, 'cause I have a tendency to use some words I shouldn't. But, but when you use yourself in third person, you tend to use more positive thoughts towards yourself.
Well, let's conclude with this. Let's set leadership to the side and have some fun and talk about your current season and how it's going. From the Vault, leadership lessons you can bank on is coast to coast, California to New York to Texas, coast to coast. But for those listening that are local, especially wrestling fans, how are things looking for you this year, Coach?
It's a little rough right now. I mean, we have some good kids, some great kids. We got some injured kids, but we're starting to get healthy, and that's what we tell everybody. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And that's with sports or life or a job or anything. It's how you finish. And we're going to finish well because we have our injuries starting to come back. And it's not how good you are in December or January. It's how people thought I was nuts last year when I gave our football kids 2 weeks off. And then their first competition wasn't until the 1st of January. So they only wrestled half the season. Mm-hmm. But again, that goes back to respect and loyalty. And they're like, we only got to wrestle half a season? Great. And their bodies were fresh. And we placed third in the state, had 4 state placers. And Eli, we would be competing again for top 3 finish. But Eli Sanchez, our returning heavyweight, who was first team All-Ohio in football, got a full ride to UNLV, and with his NLI deal, it was financially better for him to graduate early, and he's at UNLV. So we lost some big points there, but we have a 2-time state placer back in Braxton Martin. We have a state qualifier back in Law Davlin. We have another young man, Jason Everett, who's was a returning district placer, who's ranked in the top 10 at state. Got another young man coming back, Ronnie Cromer, who's ranked in the top 10 at state. So we're going to be right there getting 4 or 5 kids from Columbus and competing, for top 10 finish.
Outstanding. Well, good luck with it, Coach. It's been a pleasure. Will you come back sometime?
Absolutely, anytime. Anything for you, Paul, because talk about loyalty. You're a loyal guy to me. I'm a loyal guy to you. And like you said, your little mafia party, you can count me in.
Thank you very much, Coach. Good to see you.
Thank you.
From the Vault is sponsored by Vita Coffee and Wine Bar in downtown Sandusky, where the elite meet to eat. Visit us in person or on the web at vitasandusky.com.
From the Vault is supported by Lucky Stone Uniforms. Go to luckystoneuniforms.com to supply uniforms for local law enforcement, fire service, EMS service, and medical agencies and organizations in North Central Ohio.